Hey everyone, Lindsey Emami here, and welcome to my monthly market update for February 2022. I am a realtor with Shepherd Homes Group, which is part of the Sampson Properties brokerage. And today I'm going to be talking about some important topics, mostly renting and home ownership as a hedge against inflation. We're going to be talking about those because those seem to be really hot topics in the market right now. So first, I'm going to begin by talking about why home ownership as a hedge against inflation is so important. And as you know, the prices around us continue to rise, from the grocery store to the gas stations, and the home ownership is certainly not immune to that in any way. And neither are the rising rent prices. So we're going to be talking about that as well. But one of the things we want to focus on is how locking in someone's fixed monthly costs, their biggest cost that they have in home ownership at today's price, and why it's so beneficial to safeguarding someone that you know or yourself, as well as hedging against that inflation and the rising costs going forward. Okay, so I want to begin with a quote first from Investopedia. And it says, real estate is one of the time-honored inflation hedges. It's a tangible asset, and those tend to hold their value when inflation reigns, unlike paper assets. More specifically, as prices rise, so do property values. So what can we see here is that home ownership is one of those things that you can lock in the cost today. It's an asset that's increasing in value in time. And as prices rise and home values rise and all the prices around us rise, locking in that fixed cost in home ownership is really game changing as a hedge against inflation tomorrow. So what I want to do on this next slide is show you a visual that really depicts what we're talking about, home ownership outperforming inflation over time. So let's take a look at the slide here. This is home ownership as a hedge against inflation, and I want to break it down for you so you can really see what we're talking about here. This is home price appreciation versus the consumer price increases over the decades, and it goes all the way back to the 1970s. Now, what you're looking at here is the blue bars are the average inflation rate for the decade, and the green bars are the average home price appreciation for each of those decades as well. So let's look at the 1970s to start. Inflation increased at 7.1% that decade, and home values appreciated at 9.9% in the same time period. So home ownership outperformed inflation. And where do you want to be in inflationary times? In that asset that's outperforming inflation. Now in the 1980s, it was a little bit more balanced, 5.6% inflation and 5.5% home price appreciation. And look at the 90s, we start to see home values tick up a little bit more, outperforming inflation throughout that decade. Now we know the 2000s were very different. Home prices performed at a very different rate than what we've seen in many other decades, and even what we're seeing today and potentially tomorrow. We also had a fundamentally different housing market. We had the oversupply of homes. We had lending standards that were vastly different than they are today. Homeowners didn't have the equity that they have in their homes right now. So fundamentally a different market where we're not headed going forward. So home prices did not outperform inflation in the 2000s, but look at the 2010s. This is where home values really start to kick in. Homes started appreciating much faster than inflation, 4.9% versus 1.8%, and then 2020 and 2021. And you know what's happened here. Massive home appreciation, a drastic difference where home values outperformed inflation. So over time, you can see that home ownership is generally looked at this great hedge against inflation because home values are performing better than the inflation rate. That means that someone buying a home today can lock in today's costs and protect themselves against the rising cost of inflation in that biggest monthly payment going forward. Now, this becomes really important when we start to talk about renting, because renting takes on the risk of rising rental prices year after year after year. We've shown that data and how rental prices are truly skyrocketing. So let's share a quote with you here that's really powerful for renters. It says this from Bankrate. A fixed rate mortgage allows you to maintain the biggest portion of housing expenses at the same payment. Sure, property taxes will rise and other expenses may creep up, but your monthly housing payment remains the same. That's certainly not the case if you're renting, and that's because rental prices rise year after year. And so this becomes really powerful for someone who might be sitting here going, I could buy today, but I'm going to kind of press pause and I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait and see what happens in home values if they drop, if they rise. Well, all the forecasts that we've seen show that home values are projected to continue rising. Not at the same pace as they have been over the past year, but they will continue to rise. We also know that mortgage rates are projected to keep rising, and we know that rental prices are rising. So what does that mean at the end of the day? Someone who continues to rent but could buy is taking on the additional increases in rent year after year, plus it's going to cost more to buy a home down the road. So really important for renters to understand this dynamic. And I think this next visual really helps show how rental prices compare to the inflation rate. This shows that rent increases have been getting greater than inflation in most years. So let me break it down again. Rental price appreciation versus core inflation rate, again, going all the way back to the 70s. So your blue line is that core inflation rate and your green line is the rental price appreciation. And what do we see on the whole? The green line higher than the blue line in most scenarios, meaning that rental prices have increased at a faster rate than inflation most times. Yes, there's some ticks down below that blue line. However, that means it's more expensive to rent over time because rental prices are continuing to rise faster than the rate of inflation. So when we have this conversation with renters, it becomes a mission critical that they understand the dynamic of buying now if they can avoid those increasing costs for rent and inflation all around us. So let me go ahead and share this quote. And I think it really kind of brings it home for us. It says from Forbes, it says homeowners are shielded from mounting rental prices because their cost is fixed, regardless of what's happening in the market. They're locking in that payment at today's cost. Tangible assets like real estate get more value over time. You've seen that in the graphs and the data that I've shown you, which makes buying a home a good way to spend your money during inflationary times. You know, we've talked a lot about home price appreciation, and I'm sure you want to know where is that headed as we have this conversation and we think about rising prices and how homes aren't immune to that. And that's for certain. So let's take a look at this next graph from Home Price Expectation Survey. And I think that gives you a really clear picture of where home prices are projected to head according to the experts. Now, the Home Price Expectation Survey is a survey of 100 economists, data analysts, people who are projecting our home price appreciation. And in the fourth quarter of last year, this is the projection for cumulative house appreciation by 2026. So what are you looking at? They divided out the group into optimists and pessimists. Optimists being the ones projecting the most appreciation over the next 5 years, and pessimists estimating on the lower side. So take a look at the orange bar. Those are the pessimists. You know, the experts that are saying home price appreciation on the lower side. Cumulatively, by 2026, it's going to be over 23%. So as experts look forward, the conditions on the market, what's projected to happen? Home values are expected to increase in value over time. Even on the lower end, 23%. 23.7 is pretty significant over the next 5 years. So locking in today's cost is mission critical for those who have the opportunity to do so, to protect themselves in their largest monthly payment. Because as we know, with home price rising, mortgage rates rising, inflation all around us, it's going to get more expensive to purchase a home in the future. So I'm going to pause here. So if you're renting or you know somebody that's renting or you have any questions about how much equity you have in your home right now, please feel free to contact me. I'm happy to help anybody or answer any questions that you may have. So that's the end of my update for right now, but please connect with me if you have any questions about anything I went over or anything else regarding buying or purchasing a home in Northern Virginia. I'll see you next month.